Welcome to the Old Lady Hour with Lorrie and Sheryl. And today's guest is Jennifer Horne. We're so excited to have her here. She is award-winning and an author and our friend. So we have lots to talk about, so we'll just go right to it. And the first thing I wanted to start with was like the beginning of you moving to Tuscaloosa, because we have that in common. And of course, I like to have everything about me. So, so you moved here in 1986 as a graduate student, and it was in creative writing?
It was in creative writing.
Okay.
I came here for the MFA program in creative writing.
And what drew you to that?
You know, it was a really kind of a coincidence in that I was in Columbia, Missouri, getting an MA in journalism, and I was not very happy with the fit for me in hard journalism. I was always more interested in creative writing and at most sort of feature writing. I was married to my college sweetheart at the time, and he got really interested in the book arts, and this was the program that had an MFA in book arts.
Did he work with Glenn House then?
He did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I said, I'll apply to the creative writing program because I thought that was the direction I wanted to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was how that happened.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 86, Tuscaloosa was a little bit different place.
It was.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure our paths crossed, but we didn't know it.
That's so funny that we were around Tuscaloosa together, probably in the same buildings.
The same age,
and didn't know
basically.
it.
Yeah, the same. I was not enrolled in anything. I was a faculty wife.
Mm-hmm. And you've talked about being in the faculty wives art club or something?
There was a University Women's Painters group through the University Women's Club. I think that was the name, was actually for the wives of faculty. It wasn't so at that point, which felt very anachronistic.
Yeah.
And
did you have to wear white gloves?
No, we weren't, but they had been.
Mm-hmm.
So, and anyway, I didn't stay a member of that I stayed part of the painters, but I didn't stay officially a member of the University Women.
Yeah.
Because, for reasons. But anyway, it was a good way to.
Yeah.
But I was still trying to write at the time, so I was like hanging around the creative writing people program.
We might even have met, just at some party or reading or something. I love the thought of that. Like we were just like destined to be friends.
There it
is. Yeah.
And then, so from there, you have several degrees.
I do. I just couldn't stop.
Okay.
Yeah. I did go ahead and finish that. I was an instructor in the English department. Got jobs in editing for Alabama Heritage and the UA Press. I finally thought I just don't like being in an office all day, and I was looking for a different way to earn a living. So I went and got a degree in community counseling, which I ended up not doing, although it's been really great in terms of teaching workshops because I learned how to handle groups and deal with people's stuff.
Sure.
And then also when I wrote the Sarah Mayfield book about a woman who was in Bryce Hospital for 17 years, I had the tools to understand her diagnoses and situations. So, nothing's ever, it was just a detour.
Right.
It was kind of an interesting
but
detour.
But you can kind of put it in your bank of things.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's one of our themes of being older people, older women, is that, what we've done in the past, we might not think it's useful, but sometimes it comes back.
Yeah, and there are through lines. I mean, when you live long enough, you can look back and see the through lines. Like every job I've ever had, however different they seem from each other, all had to do with language and meaning and understanding. So and that's my thing.
Right. And so I think even though, and you were the poet laureate, the state of Alabama, and do you want to just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was the 12th poet laureate. They used to have much longer terms, even though it started in 1931, I think. They used to have much longer terms, so that's why there have only been 12. I had a 4-year term. I was selected by the Alabama Writers Cooperative, as it's now called. It was then the Conclave. And it was such an honor in the first place to be chosen to do that, to be what they call the public face of literature for the state. And so you get to go out and talk to schools and Rotary clubs and just kind of be a presence, and also get to encourage other writers, which is something I really like doing. Halfway through, though, the pandemic hit, and so somebody who was supposed to be in a very public position had to figure out, I cannot go out and do things anymore. And so that's when I decided to, during National Poetry Month, April, I read a poem by an Alabama poet every day of that month, because I knew a lot of people who had books coming out, and suddenly all their signings were canceled.
Right.
And it was just, it was a bad time in many ways, but it was a frustrating time for people who had worked on books for years and then were just stuck. So that was a little contribution. And then, since I liked doing that, but I didn't think I could keep up the everyday schedule, I just started doing it once a week, and I called it the Midweek Poetry Break. And I kept doing it, and then I stopped being Poet Laureate, and I still kept doing it, and I just hit 5 years last month.
I mean, I look forward to it every Wednesday.
That's really nice.
We'll put a link to it on our thing. And I mean, it's great because I like the variety that, if you haven't listened to it already, our many listeners, it's millions. I think it's great because you just choose such a huge variety of poets, and they're kind of topical, and and they're not long.
No, I tried, like when I started doing it, I was doing it on Twitter also. I was the first Poet Laureate to use social media. So
that's
for
cool.
me, I'm not a social media maven, so that was kind of funny, but I just thought, this is the way we need to start doing this. And so I was posting them on Twitter then. And there was a 2-minute limit. So I got in the habit of keeping it pretty short.
Sure.
And I'm not doing that anymore, but I still, try not to.
Well,
go
our attention spans are kind of
Yes,
short.
And you just have that little bite of poetry every day. I'm glad you like the variety, because I've done themed things occasionally. Like I did a bunch of Russian poets for a while, and I did poems on aging. But also I just like to see what I'm reading or what strikes me, or some cool poem in the New Yorker, because there is one every once in a while.
Right.
And just throw it out there.
And I think it's good for people who don't read a lot of poetry to realize how much variety there is. I think it is one of the forms of writing that probably gets the least amount of readers in a way. And I'm not really sure why, except for I think some of the poetry that we're reading in the education system, maybe it's a little bit old, maybe it's archaic, maybe it's hard to access.
And like my English teacher at Shelton State told me, poetry is taught wrong.
Okay. Well, I think
Like as
Kids fear poetry because it's not as easily understandable as prose. And if you're not teaching poetry the right way, which I can't tell you what that is because I'm one of those kids who didn't like poetry, well, then the kids aren't going to get it.
Yeah. My husband came up with a great comparison. We were talking about this literally yesterday. He said a poem is not a cadaver to be dissected, but it's often taught that way. We're just going to take it all apart.
That's right. I mean, sometimes that's fun, but you can just experience it.
You can just experience. Sometimes it's a puzzle in the sense that you can say, oh, I see what they're doing here, and I see how these images link up. And that's sort of a second level of understanding or analysis. But you ought to be able to just enjoy it and experience it.
Just have fun with it.
Yeah.
And the midweek poetry break is just that for us. It's us, meaning those of us who don't do poetry. I can sit there for the 30 seconds or 1 minute that you're telling me this poem, and I can appreciate it without having to dissect it.
Good. I always like seeing your comments. So I do pay attention, and I feel like poets are going to read poetry anyway, but non-poets are not. And so it's part of my goal to just give people who wouldn't otherwise read a poem a poem.
Yeah. And so I think it's interesting that you are a poet, that you are drawn to that, and then your mother was a poet. So was that a big influence, or?
Yeah, huge. From the time I could write, I knew that she was a poet and she cared about poetry, and we had little books of children's poetry around the house. And then by the time I was 7 or so, I was starting to write poems. And she belonged to the state poetry group, which is called the Poets Roundtable of Arkansas. And they had contests every year, and they also had kids contests. And so she would apply, put poems into the contest, and then we would look over the children's categories, and I would send some in. Most of the time I did not win, but it was exciting to get a poem ready and think of it as a public thing that somebody might read. And one time I did win, and I won a tennis racket.
Oh, that's great.
Which was just so exciting.
That's very exciting.
It was. When you're 8, winning a tennis racket is a
pretty good.
big deal.
It was a good deal.
That's probably why I'm still a poet today, it's the tennis racket.
It's the little things, or the big things.
The encouragements, right. But my mom she was a really good poet, and very encouraging to me as a writer. So, I owe her a lot. And as you know, my sister and I, again, during the pandemic, when we had some extra time, decided that we would bring out a book of her poems, which we had thought about doing forever, but the time and the technology were both available. So we did that and brought out Root and Plant and Bloom, which was a line from one of her poems. And it was so sweet. She was born in 1934, so a lot of her contemporaries at this point, they're still around.
Oh, yeah.
They're, of course,
Yeah,
older. And so
are.
it was really gratifying to be able to get those books in their hands and let them remember her that way, because she died in 1994, so it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So that was just a great experience.
Yeah, what a nice thing to kind of revisit your mother's voice.
And it was amazing because when I was doing that, I was 60, turning 60. She died just before she turned 60.
Oh, wow.
So it put us in a weird contemporary. Yeah. So I got to know her in a whole different way than when I was just about to be 34 and she died. So that was a great gift that I had no idea.
That really
happened.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes a difference sometimes, thinking back, I am now the age that my mother was when she did this, or I'm the age of my grandmother. And so it does give you like an understanding of them, and maybe a wonder at yourself.
Yeah, then you think, the things I've gone through in my 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, so you're kind of like,
yeah. And maybe more compassion for the people your parents were. You can see, you might have thought they had all the answers, and they didn't. They were just trying their best.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's a different perspective. And so kind of following on that, I brought with me, I'm gesturing and hitting the microphone, the compilation that you did, the Old Enough, which really, I have to say, was probably an indirect influence on our podcast itself. Because
that's nice to hear.
Yeah, it was kind of like an encouragement, and we'll put the link of the book again on. Producer Sheryl can do all the things,
yes, all the magic things.
Yeah, but just talking about doing different things in your older years, maybe or continuation of the same. So it's a group of essays from older creative Southern women, and your essay in there I just kind of reread this morning, and it struck me that you said your first book of poems was published when you were 50.
Yeah.
So that startled me. I guess I was like, wow, okay, so, I mean, not that it's a bad thing, but it just like, you must have had like some persistence in there, and I'm sure you were doing other things in the meantime.
It was a long time coming, though, and I felt like I was a poet all my life. I think I had unrealistic expectations that when I finished the MFA program, I was just about 30, And I thought, well, now I'm, officially stamped a poet, and I will just go out and conquer the world. And, it doesn't necessarily.
Time to be on fresh air with Terry Gross.
Exactly. And I kept writing, and I published poems in journals, and, went to a lot of conferences and did introductions for other poets and served as a, moderator on panels. And the very first book I put out was actually an anthology of poetry, the Working the Dirt book, the anthology of Southern poets having to do with farming and gardening. And so that kind of got my name out there, and I was able to read a lot of poetry and be in touch with a lot of poets. But then it finally did take me to age 50 to get that first.
Which
first
now
book
doesn't
published.
seem that old, really.
Well, looking back, it's like, oh, that's okay, But at the time, I felt like, am I ever going to publish a book? And I finally had to decide, after a lot of frustration, sending the book out to different contests and all that, I was going to keep writing no matter what. That was just part of who I was, and I very much hoped that I would be able to publish a book of poems, but even if I didn't, I was still going to keep writing.
Yeah, because that's who you are.
Yeah.
And so I think in a lot of the arts, that's what we face pretty often, is you just do it, and sometimes other people will, publish, they'll purchase or whatever, but sometimes they won't, but you have to keep going.
And it's wonderful to get published, and it's wonderful to win prizes, but that wouldn't be enough to keep you going if the creative part didn't keep you going.
Really, it's really just that compulsion almost. I call it my affliction. And so
that you need to do that something about you needs to do that.
Right, and I think, well, I would rather not, I wish I didn't have, sometimes I feel that way. It would just be easier to live a different life.
Yeah,
but
it would be easier to be normal. But
did you have like a fantasy job in the back of your mind, or you were okay with being a poet? Because I used to fantasize about working in an office.
Oh, yeah, I would never fantasize about that.
But you did a little bit.
I did. I get real itchy when I have to be in an office all day.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah. When I was 13, I think I watched a lot of Jacques Cousteau specials, and I wanted to be a marine biologist.
Okay.
So, that was a childhood fantasy. I love being outdoors. I love the ocean. So I think that's part of the sterility of the office environment.
You're right, being inside all day.
Puts me off, yeah. And I don't know, donuts in the break room, and mandatory birthday parties. I don't know, it's not my jam. I just, maybe introverts in offices have an easier time now, and they work from home more, whatever. But so. I think I would, apart from the office part though, I think I would have enjoyed being like a book editor of novels.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be fun.
That does sound like fun.
Yeah.
But they probably still have office parties. I don't know.
They probably do, but I just picture people who are readers, they're probably just off. Working at the New Yorker would be anybody's dream job, I think.
Sure.
Just a bunch of oddballs in there doing their thing, and
so
great history, great.
Well, I'm glad you're in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that was a really good question.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, save that for the next person. Yeah.
Well, it is something to think of it like an alternative life, but which I feel like a writer can kind of explore that, which kind of brings me to like writing a biography of someone, which is kind of exploring someone else's life almost. And you spent, so I remember 17 years working on The Odyssey of a Wandering Mind, which again, we'll put a link to this. And this was so different than your poetry work, but somehow related.
Yeah. I think I first heard about Sarah Mayfield back in the 80s when I came to Tuscaloosa, because she only died in 79.
Yes,
so there were still tons of people around who knew her and had gone to bars with her, and, knew her story as she had told it. And after I got Working the Dirt done, and then Wendy Reed and I did the first of 2 books on Southern women and spirituality. That book was done, and I just started looking around thinking, okay, I like a project. I'm always going to be writing poems, but I like a project. I'll just kind of tiptoe in and try to learn about Sarah Mayfield, since nobody else has written about her. I knew of several people who had thought about it and gone some distance into it, but not. I'll just get into her papers, which are at our special collections library at UA.
And she had a lot of papers.
And she had a lot of papers, yeah. 19.4, I forget the exact statistic, 20-something boxes with journals and papers.
Wow.
And
it was it
everything.
And
yeah.
it was a lot of it handwritten.
A lot of it, yeah. And so I had to kind of get used to her handwriting style. And I just got more and more fascinated by her story and who she was. And I think there are certain, we're talking about through lines, you know, whether I'm writing poetry or fiction or essays or biography, I'm interested in place and identity, especially the South, and female identity, and how the larger cultural history affects us as individuals. And I'm talking to 2 people who did not grow up in the South, but live here and have lived here for a while.
Long enough.
Yeah, to kind of get that soaked into you some. And so I was curious about her as an individual who was brilliant and an inventor and a writer and journalist and a biographer herself, who also got confined to the state mental hospital for 17 years. And how was she like my grandmother's generation? They were about the same age. How was she like that generation in my family? And how did my artistic women, what could I learn about my family through her family also? Yeah.
And that kind of similar time period, experiences, expectations for women. And, you know, I'll encourage everyone to read the book. I mean, she had quite a very unusual life.
Yeah.
And really remarkable.
Yeah.
And that third act of hers, after getting, you know, finally being released from Bryce and writing her own books, it's pretty remarkable too.
Yeah.
So I kind of enjoyed the fact that the family homestead for her family was just a block away from our first house in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, so you knew that house.
I knew the house, and I actually know the family who lives there now. But, you know, when we first moved here, I think we bought a house near that, like in 1987, and we were there for almost 7 years. And
so did it have the cactus outside?
Yes, it had the cactus. It did. It had the cactus. It was just a very, you know, it was kind of an odd-looking place.
Yeah.
But I mean, everything to me at that point was a little odd-looking. So well, our house was cute,
but it was all I mean, I remember just even though I grew up in Arkansas, coming here from Missouri, everything just seemed so intensely green. It was just so different in feel.
It is so. It's so jungle-y in the summer, and as we're in it now, I always feel like the heat has its own personality.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay, I've been. it's you know, June was kind of okay. Once we get to July, in August, you're like, all right, we are in Tuscaloosa in the summer.
It is intense, and the heat is kind of pushy.
It is. It is very aggressive.
Yeah.
It's an aggressive heat and humidity, and I know a lot of people in other parts of the country right now are experiencing, you know, hotter than normal. But you need to be here for a while.
It's unrelenting, yeah.
And so I think I wonder how much it influences us and our culture and our outlook. Even.
You just like inevitably slow down some in summer.
Yeah.
Even if you're staying inside and you're comfortable, that's its own kind of slowness because you're just doing inside things.
Sure. But I mean, even like you live around a lot of trees, and I bet at night is the sound just kind of deafening.
Yeah, it's really, the cicada is just that very loud hum. You know, you open the door and it's wow.
Yeah, and the frogs and the crickets and everything. There's so much life that it can be kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, we live with them, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely it. So before we get too far, I wanted to talk about your latest book of poems, The Letters to Little Rock, because that is the latest book of poems. And this about your father. So we talked a little bit about your mother, but this is an ode to your father, really.
Yeah.
And you can just say a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, at one point I thought, well, I'm just done writing about my family and childhood and everything.
No, you shouldn't be done.
That seems to be one of my main subjects, so I'm okay with that. And one of the last things my dad did was come to my commissioning as Poet Laureate on November 1st, 2017.
That's great.
And he died in January of 2018. Of course, we didn't know that it was going to be one of the last things, but he was like having some balance problems, but he just decided he was going to fly from Little Rock and come to it kind of at the last minute. And it meant so much for him to be there.
Oh, I'm
You know,
sure.
the governor commissions the Poet
Right.
Laureate, so it was in the Capitol, and the big deal. And he was really happy and proud to be there. And then I had a visiting writer position at Lenoir-Rhyne College in Hickory, North Carolina for the semester of the winter-spring semester of 2018. And he died in January, suddenly, just after a brief illness, and, worked up until,
He was
as a lawyer.
He was a lawyer, but I think my father-in-law was that. He was fine until he wasn't. And then that's a good way to do it.
It is.
Yeah.
The body's just kind of done at that point. And being mostly by myself, I would come back and forth to Tuscaloosa to see my husband, but being mostly by myself, I think I used writing even more so as catharsis and processing of the grief, and that's how that book began. But this has happened to me before, like with my short story collection. Things just kept on coming. It seemed like there was just more of an inner need and urge to keep writing. And I started thinking about stories he liked to tell and experiences from childhood. And I ended up with a book of poems with a book-length sheaf that I then had to figure out what order to put in and how they held together and what followed what. And as I was writing those poems, as I was starting to conceptualize it as a book, I was also every Sunday, at the time that he used to call, we always talked at 1:30 on Sundays, at the time he used to call, I decided I would write him a letter because I just missed talking to him so much. So I would write, Dear Dad, here's what happened this week. And doing that and working on the poems gave me the idea that the poems would be second person addresses to him. So except for the first and the last poem, they're all second person addresses. And that's how they became letters to Little Rock.
So, I mean, and I liked how compressed a lot of it is, especially, in his stories. So it made me wonder, when he talked, was he the opposite of verbose? Kind of seemed pretty witty.
He had definitely had a sense of humor. He did like to tell stories. Part of the way I decided to do those story poems as short, they're 3-syllable per line, syllabic count stories, is that I thought that would give them a crispness that a more stretched out narrative wouldn't have. So for poetic reasons, I chose to do them kind of crisply. He would be more expansive. As a trained attorney,
he could talk forever.
He could talk for a long time, but he also always chose his words carefully. And then eventually, I think, as with most dads, you get where there are, dad story number one and dad story. There are the stories
you've heard them.
that you've heard, and they get applied at different times in different situations.
I did want to have you read one poem. It's really short.
Okay.
Because I think part of it was just how short it is. It's 3 lines, and it's just, to me, I don't know, this says so much in such a short way. So, all right, it's just.
Yeah. And this is one of the last poems to go into the book.
Okay.
It's one of the last ones I wrote. Yeah. It's called Hilton Head Vacation. You were the man, and the man drives the whole way. How tired you must have been.
I just love it.
I'm so glad that you do, yeah.
I mean, I love lots of them, but
Yeah.
just as an example, I thought that was a great, just an example of how a poem can be so simple, but you can get that whole life in there.
Yeah, and we talked about, women's roles in relation to Sarah Mayfield, but men's roles and what they take on and what they took on as just you're supposed to be the one in charge.
And just that realization that he was just pretty tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, which you don't think about when you're 9.
oh, okay. Well, we'll take a little break and come back very shortly.
Okay, great.
Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Hit that like button for us. Show us a little love. And while you're here, why not add a comment or two? Because we love hearing from you. Thanks.
Welcome back. I do want to let people know that our podcast is brought to you today by Overly Helpful Helene. When you need someone who's overly helpful, call Helene. More on that later.
Helene!
We're back with Jennifer Horne, and we're talking about her latest book of poems, Letters to Little Rock, not from them, although that would be maybe the next one. And so I asked Jennifer to read her poem Hold from the book, and it was just very moving for me, so I'll let you read it.
Yeah, the poem takes us through the grief process, and so the earlier poems are more about that experience. This is one of those earlier poems. Hold. When you accidentally let me step inside the houseboat without telling me the hold doors were open to dry out the hold, and I stepped into air, falling into darkness, flailing for a grip, something to grab onto, you felt so guilty, but I wasn't angry. It was only a mistake, like when you died and you weren't supposed to. You were going to get better. I was going to come see you. We were going to hold each other in a father-daughter hug, your sweet, skinny old frame welcoming me home. It's like stepping into darkness, grabbing handfuls of air, thinking, what can I hold on to as I fall, as I fall, as I fall?
Wow.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's just so moving. Thank you.
Well, thank you. One of the things a poem can do is connect things that you might not necessarily think about connecting.
And even just through the word.
And even through the word hold, the hold of a boat, and holding on to, yeah.
And just like that, handfuls of air falling, yeah.
Because in the initial grief experience, you just do feel like you're flailing, yeah.
And I think, part of getting older is losing people, and that's just what happens. And so, how to kind of cope with that or how to express it is the arts really take us there. And so I think when you're writing about your own experience, of course, we can all relate. So when have something to have it and to put those emotions and those feelings into some kind of form.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I ended up doing with this book. I was writing these kind of giant, messy, inchoate things that didn't quite feel like poems, as one does. And I was reading with our mutual friend Rachel Dobson and Wendy Reed, and I just was kind of complaining about, these are so messy and I don't know what to do with them. And Wendy said, well, have you thought about form? And that was the key that turned the door to where I needed to be, or the key that turned the lock in the door where I needed to be. And I thought, well, I could do form. And then, of course, it made total sense.
Sure.
For form to help contain grief and also provide the tension to push against. You've got all this inchoate stuff, and it's just trying to steamroll you, and you find a way to contain it but also honor it.
And it gives it shape.
It
And like
does.
literally shape on the page, which for me as a painter is interesting, that poems have the most visual form, or there they can.
Yeah.
And so that one in particular, if you see it on the page, it is, the falling part is actually, the letters are falling. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's something nice about that visual in poetry that it's different than prose or different than an essay.
Yeah, you can set it up on the page, and I don't usually do that kind of thing because it can just be kind of gimmicky.
Yeah.
It done wrong, but I felt like that was a good way to enhance the sense of falling.
Well, and
Yeah.
even like, so when you're deciding on form and line breaks, and do you have, I mean, I'm sure that there's like patterns, there's like, and they have like all kinds of names to follow. Do you use a lot of those, or I don't know enough about like all of the types of forms.
Yeah, I mean, I've mostly been a free verse
Okay.
writer, although I've experimented with form in the past. And so when you're writing free verse, you might decide that you're going to have a certain number of lines in a stanza, or you might not. You might decide that the lines are going to be about the same length, or it might be more intuitive in terms of phrases and how you want the poem to be read and where the breaths come. Since most of these poems are in set forms, I usually had to work within those
Okay.
limits,
Yeah.
which to me is fun. I like puzzles, and so it's kind of like a puzzle. Like, can I make this work? And so that the challenge then was to see what form best fit what I was writing about in the poem.
Yeah, and I think, going back to like the emotion or, containing it, it is almost like you can get a little distance from that overwhelming feelings by arranging them.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
that's well put. Yeah.
So I want to turn a little bit to like back to the book Old Enough, and then you've done so many collaborative projects. So that's really different than just being the author, able to decide everything. So, and then I think you work a lot with your husband, Don Noble,
Yep.
who is a very famous man of letters himself.
Yep.
And so how is that different from like working on your own work, and is it more fun? Is it, or just a different process?
Yeah, I mean, it is a different process when you do something yourself as an artist, as a writer, it's all on you, but you also get to make all the decisions. I mean, to me, it's like being a solo traveler versus traveling with other people. Like, if you're traveling around by yourself, you get to do exactly what you want at any moment. You also are by yourself, and you have to choose what to do at any given moment.
The worst thing is if you're at a restaurant and have to go to the bathroom, like no one else can keep your food for you.
So I've been fortunate just to have really good collaborators to work with. I'm probably happiest kind of being given my own little job to do and going off and do it. I'm not a great committee person. I never liked studying on a project with other people in school. That's just not exactly my collaborative mode. But if we can sort of divide up, here's what we're going to do now, here's my part to go do, that's where I work best. And then even though it's a growth process for me, it stretches me some. I do love working with people who aren't like me and are going to come up with other ideas that expand my sense of what might be possible, and also how we might do things. Like, working with Wendy, we need to get in touch with somebody, and so I would be composing the perfect letter that I was going to send by email, and just do everything in a super orderly, conscientious, perfect way, so that I would know that I'd sent the best possible letter. And Wendy would be like, okay, that's great, but we have her cell phone number. Let's just text her and see if there's interest, and she'd just get the ball rolling.
Sure.
And so I learned from her that sometimes you can just get the ball rolling. You don't have to plan for 3 weeks what you're going to say to somebody.
So that is good. You know, sometimes we've talked a little bit about this, about how there's people who are order Muppets and people who are chaos Muppets, and you need them both.
You do, yeah. And not to be afraid that the person might say no.
Sure.
You know? And because if they're going to say no, they're probably going to say no regardless.
Yeah. So we're glad you said yes.
Of course I would say yes,
Well,
yeah,
you
but
know.
I'm glad I was asked. But it's just, you know, and then working on Old Enough, there were 4 of us who worked on that book, and it was a begun in the pandemic book, and we Zoomed the beginning of the book. We just had meetings and, you know, get a glass of wine and sit there and talk about what this book might be. It was Jay Lamar's idea, baby, and then we eventually got to the idea that it was going to be Southern women writers and artists. It was always going to be women, but we decided on Southern, and that we would also include artists and one musician, Mary Gaucher. The hardest part about that book was the 4 of us, having lived in Alabama all of these years, knew, you know, probably 1,000 people that we would like to invite to be in the book.
Could have been multi-volumes.
It could have been so much, and so we made a decision fairly early on that we would go to people that we didn't know, who hadn't been in previous books of ours, and just kind of, again, try to stretch ourselves.
Sure, and I think,
yeah,
that's a good, and that's, you know, there are so many interesting people doing really interesting things right here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just like there's more people in Alabama or Tuscaloosa, but we keep finding them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's, you know, people from outside of the state might not get this, and I hope that there are listeners outside of the state. I have so many solid friends in the arts around the state, so many people doing very interesting, creative, innovative things, and they might not all be in one place, but if you cast your net around the state, there's an incredible creative community.
There really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's more accessible maybe than in other locations.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think, you know, people are, you know, not only they're just friendly, they don't have maybe the barriers that you might in a bigger city.
Yeah.
So, or a bigger place.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, maybe there's a little bit, still an inferiority complex in the state that's historical,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be, but so we're trying to feature the people who are here
Yeah.
doing great things.
Well, you were up at Low Mill recently,
Yes, we
right?
we were at Low Mill this Saturday, taking down our exhibit, but yeah, that place is just incredible. It's so huge. There are so many studios.
I still haven't been there. I've got to get up there.
It's really fun. It's a very, I feel like it's a very haunted place because of the history of the mill. And so it's been a lot of different things. And it was abandoned for a while until this one man with I think he was a tech man, just bought it and has been sponsored it. So it's a for-profit, it's not a nonprofit.
Oh, interesting.
And so, yes, arranged a little differently. But it's pretty incredible. So it's
Yeah.
been fun for me to have been in 2 collaborative shows with Steve Davis there.
Yeah.
And also just, you know, kind of soak up the atmosphere. It's different than here. But it's just like that creative energy and the ghosts. So
I know that you have a sensitivity.
yeah. So the
those,
first, so that was especially at night. This time it was bright when we left because it's summer. So it felt a little less, maybe a little less haunted. At night in the winter, it's kind of spooky.
Yeah.
Your subject matter for the first time was also conducive to ghosts.
Right. So there's that. So, but anyway, I don't want to talk much more about me.
Let's hear about it.
I want to ask Jennifer about her any upcoming projects you might have, or if you want to talk about anything in the works, or I don't know if some writers don't like to.
Yeah, I'm writing poems, just kind of seeing where those take me.
Okay.
Which is my usual process. I mean, the book about my dad was so specific. But previous books, one book, Bottle Tree, is pretty much poems about the South, and then Little Wonder is poems about travel. But I sort of write poems and then see what it is that I'm interested in and that I'm writing about, and see if they will shape themselves into a book. I think I'm ready to say that I've gotten interested in Tallulah Bankhead's time in London.
Okay.
And that
That's
was where
cool.
she really became Tallulah.
I think this is a scoop for us.
I think it is.
Tell us more.
So I'm reading about Tallulah, her autobiography I've read, and there are multiple biographies of her, and I've read a couple of those, and I'm reading more. And I would like to write a short, tidy book about Tallulah's London years, which is about, it's the 20s, you know, the roaring 20s. She's a young woman. She's the toast of the town. In some ways, it was her happiest, best time. And I love London, so it's a really great excuse to go there and do research.
It's too bad. You have to do some research in London. Yeah.
It just, you know, it has to be done.
Yeah.
So, that is my, you know, I hope that will become a section of, and since I wrote about Sarah Mayfield, who was a childhood friend of Tallulah's, I know about all the early years and their Montgomery atmosphere and environment, so it seems like kind of a natural thing to do that. But it's also not not the first biography of a person, as Sarah Mayfield was, and it's a chunk of biography rather than a whole one. So I just like to focus on.
But it'd be fun. It'd be add to.
Yeah.
And plus her name's Tallulah. So
Yeah. So that's
so
just
fun.
fun.
It's fun.
Yeah. So that's what I'm. You know, again, I'm a fairly cautious person. I'm tiptoeing into that project, but I'm intrigued by it.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not that cautious. I mean, I think maybe you're cautious in a field that's, you have to have some courage to do it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
it is. A lot of people would like to write, but then they don't, because I think there is that courage involved. And, but I think I heard you say something, when you're writing, you're finding things out. So, particularly with poetry, but I imagine with any research, you don't know where you're going yet.
No, I don't. I know that they're for novels they call them planners versus pantsers. You write by the seat of your pants, and I like to have a general sense. And again, the travel metaphor works. A general sense, but then I want there to be surprises and spontaneity, and not have it all figured out in advance, because that would be kind of boring. You know, you're going to make the discoveries as you go. And something you said about Sarah Mayfield's third act and Old Enough as third. I love that idea of third acts. And Mary Pfeiffer was one of the people who blurbed Old Enough, and I just finished reading Women Rowing North, her book about aging. And one of the things that just jumped out at me was, we don't have to settle for being diminished versions of our younger selves.
Yes, absolutely.
I just love that as the guiding principle of the third act.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
It is. It really is.
We're shedding that invisibility.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, one of my sayings, my slogan on social media is large and unavoidable, and which if you know me in person, you know I used to be 5'2", but I think there is a just let's not shrink, let's not be invisible.
Yes.
And I think the idea of retirement is fine, but in the arts, it's to me, it just, you need to have, when you're older, maybe you have a little more stability financially, or you have less responsibilities. Not my case right now, but in any case, that you just have the time to devote to it. And I think that as women, we have a tendency to not think of ourselves and not put the investment in ourselves.
Right.
But when you get older, you start seeing those birthdays go, and you're like, well, it's now or never.
Yeah, maybe if we're lucky, you know, after 65, we have 25 more years, maybe. If we're lucky.
Right.
Maybe, but you never know.
Yeah, you don't.
And so you want to be doing what matters to you whenever the curtain falls.
Would you ever think of writing a biography of yourself?
I don't imagine that. No.
Okay.
I don't think I've had an interesting enough life to write an autobiography. Although I could imagine writing short memoir pieces. I have thought about,
Okay.
writing. And at one point when I guess it was maybe 10 or so years ago, maybe 15, I did start writing a lot of short memoir pieces just as a kind of experiment to see where they might go. And I still have all of those, but what happened was I then started writing all these fictional stories
Oh,
about
okay.
Arkansas girls and women, which became the book
book.
Tell the World You're a Wildflower. So even if something doesn't work out, it still somehow primed the pump for a fictional outpouring. So yeah, but I can't imagine writing an autobiography of myself because I just, everything I have to say is in the books.
So you already done it.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing for me right now is that because Sheryl's here and she is doing a lot of oral history projects and working on some books about Southern artists, and I think she's including me, so I feel like I have to behave because she's like observing. Was it my Samuel Pepys? Is that?
Yeah, Peeps, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. And I think if you're around creative people, we're all sort of observing each other all the time. So you just have to get used to that and get over it. But I think our lives are worthy of being written about and worthy of being noticed. And you just never know. I mean, when you think about older women that you knew when you were younger, you never know what accidental model you might be for somebody who needs to hear it or see it at that moment.
That's right. That's right. This is just an off-the-wall question. Have you read like literature of people that you know because you're in the literary world, and do you ever recognize like yourself in there? Like especially in fiction.
Oh, you mean like I was a model for a character?
Yes.
I have not yet, although they say that people never do recognize themselves as the model for a character. Yeah, that's funny.
I'm just thinking being.
Yeah, my husband shows up in several.
Does he? Okay, does he?
Yeah,
All
because he
right.
taught so many
Okay.
MFA students over the years as
So
an English professor.
that makes a lot of sense.
He knows himself to be in a couple of.
Okay.
fictions,
I recognize myself at least one time in something, which I won't say, but then our friend Michael Martone, who we have to have on our podcast, he told me I was a model for someone in one of the short, and I'm not sure if I picked it out. Yeah, I didn't really recognize it. I think I know.
Ideally, the person is disguised
Yes.
enough. They're the inspiration for for a character, but not. Although one of the funniest things I've read about is people who, in some way, eviscerate their literary nemesis, by giving that person that name and their actual name in a book of fiction. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it strikes me that most of your writing is very thoughtful and kind to people. But do you see yourself doing any revenge poetry?
I keep a journal, so probably anything that I just needed to vent about would be in the journal writing. That's a good question. I think there's really a place in the world for angry poetry, for righteous anger.
Right now, and I'm thinking about that. That right now, that and I mean, I have a question for myself as an artist. That my art is not angry. It's not political necessarily. It's more an expression of my personality, which is not. But then I wonder, should I be responding to something more?
Yeah, I mean, I like thinking of, the world of poetry. It's a very big tent. There's room for everything, and the same is true in art. And I also think that while there's certainly a place for activist poetry and speaking truth to power in a very direct way. There's also a tremendous need in the world for beauty
Yes.
and joy, and that is a very affirmative thing to
Yeah, and-
create that.
And I think you have to keep that core of, so there's something, to hold on to.
You can't let your own soul turn black
Right.
because other people's are.
That's right,
Yeah.
that's right. So,
Yeah.
well, that's a good thing to think about. And you know what time it is, Sheryl?
It's time for my shows.
It's time for our shows. See you next time.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.